Hello, everyone. This is CM Kosemen again, back with an interesting subject weapons. My ideas for 12 or probably more weapons of extraordinary origin. Now, we all go through life in peaceful and peace loving manners, most of us. And maybe there are some of you who are gun enthusiasts. I don't know. I personally have never shot a gun, and it's not likely that I will in the foreseeable future. I'm not a war buff. I'm not, I wouldn't describe myself as a particularly violent person, so on and so forth. That being said, most of us, guys especially, always have these kind of wild fantasies about weapons and warfare, mostly when we are adolescents, but also sometimes when we grow up too. Especially if we are interested in science, history, or engineering, there's a kind of dark part of our minds that's always kind of interested in this thing, probably the same way a kid's attention is drawn by a horror movie or something. So without condoning any sort of violence, war, or conflict, or by trying to be as politically correct as possible, I still wanted to share with you some of these ideas because, especially when I'm jogging or in my idle moments, I have some ideas about what extraordinary weapons might be like. And of course, there's already a given history of extraordinary weapons in our culture's histories too. So this will be always an interesting concept to dig around in. So by weapons, by the way, I don't have this kind of, yeah, more faster rifle or a kind of a magnetic railgun or a future bomb or I don't know, air dispersed explosive or something. I think a lot of weapons buffery these days is a kind of engineering geek minded buffery, and I want to look at weapons in a more contextual way. What kind of nation or country or entity would use it against what type of enemy, so on and so forth. If you look at weapons in this contextual way, you realize that a lot of things that look like weapons are actually just not weapons. One of the big examples is, I think, the multi-country F-35 joint superiority fighter, which is basically a huge deal for all these aviation companies. It's basically a flying gravy train. And a lot of things that don't look like weapons, such as memes and so on, even in cyberspace, actually have weapons potential. If conflict means bending your opponent to your will, then in this context, a lot of things that don't look like weapons could be used as weapons. And obviously, I mean, I am particularly not a big fan of like, could this ship beat that ship, or is this plane better than that plane? I think that's just popular mechanics for you. And my interest is in more extraordinary applications of violence or extraordinary uses of things that one would normally not appreciate as weapons of war. So, by having said that, let's go. Here we go with our list. Please, at the end, comment on your extraordinary weapons ideas, or if you find something that I say plausible or implausible, please let me know. So here we go. My first idea is for a troll bomb, okay? This is, I don't know who would use this against whom, to be honest. It's certainly meant to be used by a developed, industrialized, post-industrialized country against a more kind of industrial revolution 1.0 kind of opponent. It's meant to be used against populations that are prone to conspiracy and a mistrust to own governments, and you will see in a minute why. So the troll bomb works in three steps. First, immediately before, after, or during the application of the bomb itself, the target city is doused with a nausea or sickness causing chemical. That's a chemtrail for you. So people exhibit some symptoms of sickness, but you don't really want to kill anyone directly with this bomb. Okay, that's step one. Step number two, in one single night you explode a kind of immensely bright or immensely loud air bursted munition over the city. The aim here is to shock and awe, but this again has to do no real harm, but it has to be really, it has to look like a neutron bomb or something. And then you get to the third step, which the attacking side is an industrial, post-industrial developed country. They not only spread but also hack the social media of the target states, citizens, to spread disinformation that this was a neutron bomb and everyone in that city is going to die soon. And obviously, you spray the city with nausea causing chemicals, so people already feel something is going wrong, so they go into this kind of closed feedback loop of disease and terror, and chaos breaks loose. Again, if this is a country that doesn't really trust its government, hint hint, this can manifest in widespread panic. If you do this troll bomb in multiple cities of that country, you really throw a spanner in them. Of course, why anyone would want to do this, I really don't know, because I don't think any developed country wants to seem like a user of nuclear weapons in this day and age. And while I predict this kind of troll bomb attack would create massive panic when it's first used, it may not actually be that effective when people realize they're not dying and this was not a neutron bomb attack. And obviously you only use it once. Anytime you do it later, even to a different country, it's gonna get kind of it's gonna be a used trick and the novelty is gonna wear off. And obviously this would need to be used in conjunction with a bigger campaign, a bigger aim. I mean, it's a troll bomb. Are you trolling the country? Then what for? Are you punishing them for some sort of political infraction or to enforce some sort of trade deal? I don't know. Again, an interesting concept when you first look at it. Looks and sounds deadly effective, but I guess in real life it's kind of anyways. My second idea was for a much more realistic system. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some countries are developing this already. It's a system meant to be used in urban warfare and it's called a window cleaner. Basically, it's an automated grenade launcher or a rocket launcher or just a heavy cannon slaved to a camera that has an image recognition software inside it that automatically recognizes windows. So even when you're in a kind of active conflict situation, from the comfort of your armored fighting vehicle, you could have the system designate all the windows in the building automatically. You can unselect certain windows if your own guys are up there in that floor or you don't want to hit civilians there. Or you can select different windows for double tap or triple tap for multiple hits. And you just select them, make your selection, press the button, and the system cleans all the windows by itself. It could work if there's already glass on the windows. It could work with a double charge. First round just breaks the window, second one lobs the grenade inside, and so on and so forth. Very destructive, and what in my armchair mind would imagine to be a very efficient system. And again, I think I'm not the only one smart enough to come up with this idea, and some people may already be developing such systems, or it may already be in use. I don't know. All you need is an image recognition system that knows what a window looks like and can automatically direct rounds into it. I think this can make urban warfare more convenient for the army that wields it and deadlier for the people who are unfortunate to be in there. Once again, these systems are cool to come up with, but when you think about how your own community, so on and so forth, it's really, you can see, weapons are cool, but evil and bad, I hope no one breaks them out. But having said this, if you are working in some sort of military contractor or whatever, and you hear this podcast and you want to develop the window cleaner copyright, I hereby copyright this idea, and I'm only selling it to you for $4 million. Okay, so enough money for me to have a quiet life on my own and to figure out what to do with my conscience afterwards, I guess. But hey, it's a bargain. Anyways, that was a joke. Anyways, number three in my amazing list of boyish destruction is a small RPG, a small rocket propelled grenade. I think this could be also another obvious development in warfare, especially in small arms or infantry combat. And once again, this is based on some real life insights, especially from the Second Gulf War and the cluster screw up that resulted in its aftermath. But it seems that when people are engaging in urban combat, RPGs are responsible for a proportionally bigger kill of enemy infantry than otherwise, and they're basically much easier to use. I mean, you pull the trigger, the rocket flies, you could in sometimes I guess see it flying, or I don't know. I've never used this weapon like this before, so again I'm shooting from the cuff here. But from what I read, there's an undeniable rise in the popularity of the RPG as an infantry killing as opposed to a vehicle killing weapon. So my idea is a kind of scaled down, 70% the size of a Russian rocket propelled grenade, used to engage infantry mostly. Once again, this development may already have come about. I don't know. And it's a kind of who would use this. I think any nation would use this against any other. It doesn't need to be nations, but even terrorist organizations or small combat units, guerrilla warfare might have a field day with this kind of weapon. Small RPGs. And once produced, like flies roused from a dead animal or a pile of excrement, this would proliferate wildly and it would be a very deadly weapon. I mean, once again, cool idea, but not so cool when you think you're on the receiving end of it or your country or whatever. I think the deadliest weapon system is, again, small arms and RPGs in this day and age. Unless you're going for a total nuclear confrontation or massive air raids, but then there's the political dimension of these weapons, which make them less likely to be used. Okay, so here we go. Having said that, let's go into psychological warfare a bit. I have noticed that, and you too probably, that in the mind of a fighter, sex and death are very closely interlinked, especially if you come from a certain, let's say, ethnogeography of warriors in this day and age who grew up in a religion or self-imposed culture of absolute sexual fear. And you know what I'm talking about mostly, but these guys never had a proper woman be with them. I mean, there's a kind of whole Freud's bag of issues going on in their heads. So once again, the imaginative weapon for this case is the use of sex sounds as weapons. And psychologists have documented the sound of a woman in ecstasy, screaming, like this, at very loud volumes. It's one of the most disruptive sounds out there for man or woman. And there's anecdotes of sex sounds already being used as weapons when confronted with the sound of a woman screaming in ecstasy. The reaction of all sexes is one of desire and revulsion. It's as if we want to be part of it, we want to hear it, but society has conditioned us so much that we are kind of afraid of it. I mean, men are afraid of it in a double plus way because they're both afraid of facing their own desires and they're afraid of a woman's sexual power in that way. So maybe this could be weaponized. I mean, this is again more of fantasy territory, but basically I had this kind of idea of this weird Boston Dynamics type death robot engaging jihadi fighters somewhere, some in a dust pile or whatever. And it's blasting this really loud, screaming sex noises to kind of confuse them and get them afraid, and then it's killing them in this soundtrack. So you're hearing one thing, you're seeing the exact opposite, so it's completely demoralizing and shocking. Or maybe not, could be that sex sound could get men to actually fight better. So, or they could just learn to ignore it. I mean, war is complicated like that, and yeah, the idea of sex sounds being used to completely disarm a kind of group of woman hating religious fanatics is cool. Maybe it would work, but it could backfire and it could be ignored too. So yeah, I would rather hear the sounds of a screaming woman in pleasure where they belong, not in combat. But it brings us to another issue. Could this also be a kind of televised sexual warfare? I know from Turkey in my youth in the 90s, there used to be these occasional news before television went to digital broadcasts. Pranksters would set up these broadcasting units, sometimes in conservative neighborhoods, and they would just play porn to kind of troll people. And every year or something, there would be news about the discovery of this kind of illegal sex broadcaster from a machine in a kind of shed or something like this. And these would be hilarious. So I wonder if this could be weaponized in that sort. So suddenly, on the eve of the bombing, I don't know, once again, the aggressor in this case would be a developed post-industrial, post-digital country, and the victim would be a kind of developing world country with kind of crowded urban population, but no real technical understanding of how their systems might be hacked. So the night that a strategic bombing campaign is going to start, suddenly from all TVs, instead of this important news of the enemy attack, you get porn broadcasts non-stop. And you go to social media to see what's happening, but...
So it's a kind of destructive trolling attack by a digitally, technically advanced country against another country that's still in the developing era. And once again, it's fun to speculate. Who knows, maybe this weapon would be a kind of non-weapon, because it might turn people's minds away from the actual risk. I mean, the aim in all these kind of sex sound attacks is to confuse or to demoralize or to generate fear in your target population. But anyways, that was an interesting idea, if nothing else. That's a good idea. The scene I have in my mind was actually based on the famous animated film Ghost in the Shell, where the female android is facing a robot attacker in a museum, and the robot is like an insect and it's completely emotionless machine gun thing. And I imagined how that scene would play out with a hentai soundtrack in the background, because that's just me, because Ghost in the Shell is a famous anime, and that's what led me to this kind of whole sex sound psychological weapon idea. Anyways, another interesting idea, number 5, is the use of LSD or other hallucinogens as a crowd maddening mechanism. Obviously, in this case, the attacker is a developed country, again, probably covertly, because no one wants to acknowledge this kind of stuff in today's politically correct world. And the victims could be either a group in that country, or a group in an enemy country, or an actual country itself. Anyways, so basically, you have these invisible radar-proof drones in the sky, and they kind of spray aerosolized LSD over the crowded areas of the city, and you watch the whole city go bonkers. Or you can mix it in the water supply. You could use rockets, silent rockets, to drop it into the water supply. If you're doing this against a kind of third world country, it's more likely to succeed, because those countries don't have as much scrutiny of their utilities. But again, the effect would be, I think, very effective. Lots of people going insane, lots of deaths, heaven forbid. It's funny, in my heart I'm a pacifist, so I feel really guilty talking about these weapons and systems, whatever. Anyways, so it would surprise you that something like this has been done, actually, possibly by the CIA. There is no definitive evidence, but one journalist named H.P. Albarelli, that's Albarelli, claims to have uncovered that in 1951, something known in France as the Point Saint-Esprit incident, in which the residents of a small French town completely went insane. One claimed to see red flowers blossoming on his body and tried to cut them out. Another person said his head was turning into molten lead. One man jumped out of a window saying, "I'm a plane," screaming. Others reported snaking eating their bellies and tried to cut them out. This was really gory. I think some people died. So this incident has never been truly traced down. The official explanation was mercury poisoning in the bread dough. But this journalist, H.P. Albarelli, claims that this was actually a kind of weaponized LSD experiment by the CIA. So obviously, if something like this happened, it would never be admitted. But then again, to truly claim it was the CIA was going too much into conspiracy theory country. But the evidence remains that mass hallucinations are an extremely deadly force in a crowded place. This was a village. Now, imagine a city of 10 million, 8 million, 2 million. The water supply is spiked, and your citizens are post-industrial citizens, so they are kind of unaware of what's going on. Effects would be massive trauma, massive destruction. Why anyone would want to do this is beyond me. We are just talking about the weapons implications now, as if they could be separated from real life implications. But I think weaponized LSD is a really strong and a really kind of deadly psychological warfare agent. And once again, imagine if you're inflicting this on a kind of religious population. That would be interesting. I mean, if you did this in a kind of more secular or modernized country, you would have things like the ones I described from France, snakes in my belly, my neighbor is a witch or something. But a religious, conservative and devout country, it's interesting to contemplate. Maybe it wouldn't be as effective because people would just think, oh, God is speaking to me, okay. And they wouldn't panic. Whereas modern people would panic a lot more with the fabric of reality breaking down around them. Interesting stuff to consider. Why am I talking about this? Weapons, death, panic. I think a dark part of everybody's subconscious is secretly turned on by this. But also, if you're a kind of sci-fi writer, I guess there's a general utility in these ideas that maybe you would want to write about these too. And let's hope we never see them for real. Okay, moving on with weapons and stuff and drones. Drones are actually a much underrated system. I mean, today, I think there's a general trend in air warfare, in bigger and costlier weapons platforms, as if you always need a kind of generation 4 or 5 multi-million jet to bomb bunkers in a desert, but usually you don't. Usually planes are flown to fight against a much more technically backward country or technically backward opponents. So this being said, I come to number 6, which is a kind of Takano Swarm. So the Takano is a turboprop-driven Brazilian counter-insurgency bomber fighter aircraft. It looks like a crop duster because that's all you need to find people sheltering in a forest or a desert and to drop bombs on it. So the aim here is to maximize utility by cutting back on fleshy things that most air forces may not already need. And Google this. It's the Takano airplane, Tucano. So if you're fighting a real counter-insurgency, you will probably need to demothball or reconstruct some weapons, some airplanes like this. You will need planes that are less like the F-35 and more like the A-1 Warthog, which is ugly, but it gets the job done. God, I feel like such a kind of armchair. I don't really like these armchair weapons platforms enthusiasts, but I'm sounding like one, but we're talking about weapons, so here we go. And anyways, so my idea is a semi-drone swarm. I guess something like this is being developed already. So the idea is to have one or a few human operators on either like F-16 type jets or Takano airplanes themselves, and linked to them are a whole swarm of other drone airplanes that are constantly talking between each other. Talking by mean digitally communicating, of course. And these planes can execute a swarm attack over an enemy territory or an insurgent base with much less cost and much more efficiency than a huge ass expensive and unnecessary jet bomber flight. So once again, this is too armchair, but that was number 6, which brings us to number 7, which is a kind of really evil idea, so bizarre that I feel bad talking about it. But this is the Salt Shaker invisible drone. So imagine you're fighting, and again, the aggressor here is a industrially developed nation, and the victim here is probably a less advanced country or a band of insurgents in one, something like this. So the idea here is to have, just to make life nasty for these people in these urban centers. I mean, I'm just going to name it. Some country like Russia or China could use this system more comfortably than the Western world does. The Western world would still use it, but would deny it. But anyways, the Salt Shaker is an invisible drone loaded with just dumb old machine guns firing downwards at a 90-degree angle. It's invisible to the radar. So what it does is it basically flies over an enemy civilian territory and just makes life difficult for people living there by just at night or a busy hour at a high altitude going. It may not even need to shoot these bullets down. Dropping flechettes would be just as dangerous. So it's like these kind of spikes dropping from a stratospheric height and just achieving bullet-like velocities through the virtue of their mass alone. Once again, a swarm of these unpleasant, undetectable drones could make life really difficult for whoever that decides to be your enemy. Again, more ugly stuff, because there's gonna be like children, women, old people, innocent people's houses. Like you're in a house and suddenly, pting, a kind of bullet drops in and there goes your son's or daughter's leg or body or whatever, or it just doesn't need to hit anyone, but the terror caused by that sensation that the enemy is out there and he can hit you at any time, at any place for no reason, it kind of would make life really, really difficult. So there was a salt spray. Maybe someone's already building something like this. If you have the idea to build something like this from this podcast, please don't credit me. I don't even want money. I would want money for the previous window cleaner system, because that seems like somehow more of a just war, but this is just pure evil. Anyways, moving on. We spoke a lot about drones, and it seems like they're the way to the future, especially these inexpensive flying drones with a hunk of explosives strapped. If I'm not mistaken, ISIS killed a counter-terrorist commander that way in the last year. So this is probably a no-brainer. It's like a drone that flies and hits a target, basically. So in the future, these may replace bombs or bombers altogether. It's just a dumb bomb that flies there and bam. And we know from videos of drone experiments that researchers are pretty much able to make drones that operate in swarms and perform the exact same maneuvers or hit the exact same spots. This is the drone sound of this is the sound of a small swarm of drones, if you haven't heard. So it's it's just like a I don't know, like a Chinese dragon with exploding segments that flies through the air, made reality. Again, I'm so certain that this is already being weaponized. It already has been weaponized. So, no brainer here. So let's go. I mean, also you don't need to have drones just in the air. I mean, air is a very controllable environment for drones. So that's why we're seeing drones there first. Land is harder to navigate. Sea is even more harder to navigate because of the waves and winds and currents and all that. But I think some companies are making progress with driven and sea-based drones too. So you could have aquatic killer drones. Oh, we already have them. They're called torpedoes. And some of them are really sophisticated. I mean, in their latest campaign, ISIS was using a lot of suicide cars, and if you look at the images of these cars, they are really violent looking. They're like something out of Mad Max, and maybe drones could make an industrial country could adopt drones for the same purpose against tank and armored warfare. So if you're, I don't know where in the future, in East Asia or something, having a tank battle, you would still have tanks, but they would be preceded by this wave of robot suicide cars to ram the other guy's tanks or armored columns or whatever. So that's an interesting model to consider. Anyways, more ideas. Again, oh god, the idle hands are a devil's workshop indeed. So, well, this is another troll weapon. It's designed not to kill, but to cause maximum harm and maximum difficulty for the target population. Basically, it's a laser that's keyed to an eye recognition software. So whenever you turn this on in a building, it immediately blinds anyone who's within looking range. It's a Medusa software. Why anyone would want to do this is beyond me. It's an unnecessarily cruel weapon that doesn't discriminate between combatants or non-combatants. But you know what? I have an idea that in the future we are going to go to this territory. The Western world is priding itself in the development of this kind of selective weapons that only kill the bad guys. But sooner or later we will get Western governments that don't care about who the bad guys are. And in the future, these governments will engage in wars that are more old school, more like World War II, like collective punishment, terror bombing, these kind of operations, the whole kit. So these kinds of governments might want to make use of such deadly things. So again, like a mobile robot sentinel that blinds anyone who looks that way. And if you're someone who had nothing to do with this, tough luck. I mean, that's because, they say, you're going to have to get much, much cruel. You're going to have to get far, far tougher on them. And might happen. Hope not. Anyways. So yeah, number 9, face recognition mass laser blinder Medusa system for you. Another, so we're going to get, you see, most things that one wouldn't consider weapons have weaponizable capability. Imagine you want to create chaos in a target country because, I don't know, they done you wrong or they're sitting on strategic oil reserves or something. An idea could be just to have a handgun that's really resistant against falls. Why? Because you're going to drop them from the air in their thousands. You don't need to bomb them. If this country is already kind of fragmented socially and ethnically or religiously, whatever, you will see shit brewing up if you just bombard population centers with these crates of guns that anyone could pick up. And the incentive for you to pick up is already there if you're living there, because if you don't pick up, your neighbor might pick it up and might use it against you. So yeah, 3D printed weapons mass dropped on an enemy third world country, and just the attacker country, which would probably be a developed first world country, would just have to sit back, relax, and enjoy the civil war start up there. It's really dark, I know. So once again, if the aim of present day war is to create unrest and chaos and disrupt your target country's life, you may not even need to be violent. I mean, influencing elections, influencing or creating political instability is just one of the tools in your macabre paintbrush, you know? So actually, it was no surprise to me that there was a recent, I'm speaking in March 2017, but just last month there was a WikiLeaks about CIA and the massive operational abilities they had, intelligence agencies had, in in basically listening to people, hacking things. They can control data from all over the place, and just in case somebody decides to do something bad, you know. And believe it or not, there was within the CIA notes in this WikiLeaks about a strategic meme command, whose task was to create, disseminate, and spread and analyze the dissemination of weaponized memes. So number 11 in this list is memes and social engineering, but this has already been done. I wonder which memes we are using right now in our daily discourse, or the recent generation would know this better. I mean, there's the whole alt-right memes and politics and debate kind of thing. I wonder which one of the discourses there are planted weapons, basically, and which ones are indigenously created. And I really wonder how the situation is like in countries that are on the receiving end of this meme warfare, like in places like Russia, China, Turkey, Europe. Which memes are really coming from the heart, and which ones are coming from the CIA? Once again, I advise always against conspiracy thinking, but now that there is evidence of something like this being in use, I really wonder, are a lot of the memes we have used in the past few years just this massively influential CIA campaigns? Or you could look at it in another way. Does the CIA just have this kind of really dysfunctional military industrial complex meme analysts and meme warfare center that's basically sucking up money but is not doing anything noticeable? I think the reality is a mix of both. But anyways, going on to our last and most deadly and macabre hypothetical weapon. So we've established in this podcast, by discussing these various fictional and dark weapons, that one of the most effective weapons is instability. It's not, in this day and age, you don't even need to bomb, but even bad news might be more effective than an actual bomb. So I think this is the ultimate weapon in the 21st century, where you don't have an actual shooting war, but you have this kind of insidious competition between different protean shifting power blocks, and behind the scenes they are willing to do almost anything and willing to use almost any proxy as long as they are not exposed. And it's especially dark and chilling if you consider that in this day and age, the strongest weapon, the strongest effective weapon is not a bomb, is not a plane, is not a missile system or a new rifle caliber or a new railgun of the Navy or a fighter plane or something. No, It's a bunch of guys willing to kill anyone, anywhere, under any pretext, and if they can pull it off, under any disguise. This is the ultimate death weapon of the 21st century. And once again, I'm always advising against conspiracy theories. Never consider conspiracies unless you have 100% evidence. But I'm recording this just as news reaches us from London. This is March the 22nd, 2017, and there's been again really bad shooting, terror attack in London. They say it's ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever. Things like this happened in France, Germany, Turkey, wherever, US. And it really makes one wonder if this death weapon, this undetectable assassination and chaos squad, can be built and used. Has it already been used? Are we seeing it in use? How many countries have the operational capability to do this? How many countries can do this and lay the blame on another country? Are multiple countries operating such terror squads against each other in a kind of masked ball in the dark? Because the actual damage done is, I mean, if you put it in really like basic terms, it's negligible. You're less likely to die even in this day and age of terrorism than of a lightning strike. But the psychological effects are massive. With a few well-placed, terror attacks. Imagine this like a kind of darker version of Bruce Willis in the Die Hard movies. So he goes in and kills a lot of people, no questions asked. With a few well-placed such attacks, you can sway a certain country's mood, political stance, overall feeling in any direction. And this is once again really dark to consider. That was it, guys. 12 ideas for extraordinary weapons. My most darkest podcast to date, made even more darker with these awful terror news coming from London out there. To conclude, weapons suck. For men especially, it's really dark and alluring to dream about them, and this is what I did with this podcast. One can dream, but hopefully we never see any ideas or any of these in action, As always, have a nice day. By the way, the open question time is still in effect. So if you have any questions to me about this episode, weapons, if you have any kind of dark weapon designs of your own, please share them with me. Also, if you have any questions about anything else, my artwork, my life, personal questions, share them in the comment section below. And have a nice and safe day, ladies and gents. It's a scary world out there, but when you think about it, it's actually also a not scary day. But anyway, I'm getting carried away on a tangent out there. Be happy, stay safe. Ciao.